Hello, Aurora lovers. I'm DaleBoan from DaleBoanImaging, and this is Aurora Hunting 101. This is episode 24. What are Noctilucent Clouds? If you're hunting Aurora in the summer twilight, you may encounter beautiful blue glowing clouds. These Noctilucent Clouds are probably rarer than Aurora. They're only visible in the summer. They're only visible between about 50 and 70 degrees north or south, and they're only visible during twilight. Let's take a look. This is one of my first photographs of Noctilucent Clouds. This is actually a bit of a telephoto picture. I think it was closer to 200 millimeters, so quite a bit of telephoto. So the clouds are very low on the horizon in this case, and the light trails on the right side here are from a passing train, and it lit up the mist or the fog that was back behind the trees. But these gluey, blue, sometimes white if they're a little bit overexposed clouds are the Noctilucent Clouds. Here they're showing a little more blue and with a mixture of other clouds. And you can see how they are much whiter and seem to glow in comparison to the clouds that are in front of them. You know, you can see even up in here, you can see the blue glow, even though that there are clouds that are much closer in front of them. And a lot of the clouds usually are lit from beneath because the sun is already set. This is something that you see in twilight. They're not bright enough to be visible during full daylight, and they're lit up by the sun, and they're up in the Arctic, and they form in the Arctic during the summer months. And we see them in the situation where the sun is shining on them, and we're in twilight, so we're in the Earth's shadow, but they're still fully lit. And then as the Earth's shadow moves, as the sun gets lower on the horizon, the clouds often stop being lit up by the sun, and we can't see them anymore. Here's another example. This is a fairly wide band of them. This is a panoramic image over Cold Lake, Alberta, a few years ago, over Edmonton, Alberta. So there's a lot of light pollution. Like they are brighter than Aurora, but you still need the darkness to see them. They're sort of a narrow window to see them. This is one of the best displays I've ever seen. This is actually another panoramic image with a camera. It was photographed with a camera in portrait. Multiple exposures across there. That road is continuous, so you're looking, well, not east-west, but a straight road on either side. So it was filling up half the sky, almost all the way up to the top. I have not seen a display like that since. That is Abraham Lake in Alberta. So we used to have a fairly nice forecast for them. There was a satellite that went over routinely, and it would measure where they were above the North Pole and generate a map. Unfortunately, that satellite failed. The replacement for this is measurements from the NOAA 21 satellite, and it's certainly not as pretty, but it is usable. So the scale at the bottom, dark blue, is not particularly strong, and then the closer to red you get, the more dense the Noctilucent Clouds would be. So in this area there'd be more clouds, these areas over here, and they're not very far south, right? This is up at the top is northern Canada, Hudson's Bay, Alaska, Russia's down here, Europe's over here, England and Scandinavia. So some of them are up above, in northern Scandinavia, Greenland, the far north of Canada. They do move around quite a bit, and they do rotate. We'll come to that a little bit. But we just don't have as good of mapping capability as we had even last year. The only place I know that you can get this map is on the website spaceweather.com, which is a space weather news site. It's different than spaceweatherlive.com, which has the aurora and solar information on it and the app. This is pretty much purely a information only website, but interesting goings on. And they do have this, and they do have the 30-minute forecast and things like that on there for aurora. Here's actually a little bit of a time lapse. So you can see the clouds over here drifting off to the west, which is the way the wind is predominantly below. But you can see that the Noctilucent Clouds higher up are moving west to east, and that's typical for them. They rotate the other way. And just a photography trick, if you're wondering why this is jittering around a little bit, it's because I left the image stabilization on my lens, and every time it took a picture, it was in a slightly different position. You should always turn that off if you're on a tripod. Here's another time lapse. You can see the clouds, and this one they seem to be moving a little bit west, but in general they're predominantly moving. Moving to the east. Predominantly, they're moving to the west. Another time lapse. You can see the avocets running around. And you see the stars rotate. So this is a fairly long time lapse, but this one doesn't have as much Noctilucent Clouds, but you can still see the difference in quality between the blue of the Noctilucent Clouds and the grays of the lower altitude clouds. The Noctilucent Clouds are just below their level of the aurora. They're about 70 to 80 kilometers up. The aurora starts around 100, so maybe even the 70 to 80 range. So they're actually the highest clouds, highest type of clouds. Can I get to the next one? So when you're taking pictures of them, and especially if you're out aurora hunting, you can sometimes get the aurora with them, or very frequently. This is a lake in northern Saskatchewan. It's a little hard to tell that they're pretty low on the horizon, but there's a layer of Noctilucent Clouds below the aurora here. And you got the two color bands that are very typical for aurora seen from a distance. And then a house big cabin down there with a whole lot of lights. And then sometimes if the aurora is more overhead, like in this case, you get the Noctilucent Clouds in the northeast, I think, and then looking more west, you get the aurora. This is another one with the dim aurora. It's probably a fairly strong aurora, but it's not that dark, so it was you can't see a lot of the detail in the aurora. And then there's a big band of Noctilucent Clouds below it. And they show up certainly across Western Canada. This is Horseshoe Canyon in Alberta, lit by the moon as it rose. As I said, they're pretty bright. You always get pictures with the clouds and other things, as Comet Neowise a couple of years ago. Comet Neowise again. That's just outside of Moose Jaw, but we have this nice big band of Noctilucent Clouds before sunrise. Yeah. So that gives you an idea of what to look for. You're looking for those sort of wavy patterns. It's something that's very far away. We're talking hundreds of kilometers away typically. Even if it was overhead, it's 80 kilometers away, right? Yeah, because it's 80 kilometers up in the sky. So in summary, the Noctilucent Clouds are a somewhat rare phenomenon. They've actually been increasing in frequency. There's some evidence that it's related to the release of methane, but they are definitely becoming more and more common. But they do only form in the summer or late spring, to invisible until early fall maybe. And they're visible from the prime aurora hunting locations from 50 to 70 degrees north for the northern hemisphere. Same in the south. Of course, the seasons are opposite. The southern hemisphere, summer is in our winter, but so they switch poles every twice a year. So if you're out hunting in the summer, in the twilight, certainly keep an eye out for them. They're can be very beautiful in a lot of the pictures. With that, please check out episode 25. What color are the aurora? And I'm wishing you clear skies and happy hunting.